Stanford joins the ACC this season along with their fellow Pac-12 conference friend, Cal. This really makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Both teams are on the West Coast joining the Atlantic Coast Conference. They only have to travel a couple thousand miles for every single conference game that they play, aside from SMU, of course. Texas, another one of my favorite Atlantic Coast states. Conference realignment really starting to make a lot more sense this year. Looking forward to it for sure. It's going to be interesting watching Stanford travel thousands of miles to go play a conference opponent, which they're probably, with this roster, unfortunately for Stanford, going to lose to. Stanford opens the season with a really interesting matchup against TCU on a Friday night before most of the week one action takes place. This should be a really close game. We do think that TCU is a little bit more talented overall and will probably have a slight edge even though they're on the road. But this one definitely isn't a guarantee for the Horned Frogs. Stanford should be able to hang around for quite a while and make this one a pretty interesting game. Same can't quite be said for Cal Poly the week after. That one should be a very easy Stanford win. They have a really early bye week this season and immediately hit ACC play following that. Syracuse and Clemson are difficult back-to-back road trips. Syracuse brought in Kyle McCord from Ohio State, and he's going to be a pretty solid quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks Syracuse has had in a long time, even though he wasn't quite up to the Buckeye standards. Clemson made headlines by not bringing in a single transfer, but they've recruited well over the past years, and they're still going to be a really solid team and one of the favorites to win the ACC. This stretch of games doesn't get any easier, though, with a home game against Virginia Tech, another team that's on the rise in the ACC, one of the teams bringing back the most returning talent from last season. They're going to be very talented, and they have a real shot to potentially be a dark horse in this conference. Notre Dame on the road. Another really tough game. The Fighting Irish brought in a transfer quarterback out of the ACC in Riley Leonard from Duke. He should lead Notre Dame to have a pretty strong year offensively, and especially because Notre Dame's at home, this game just doesn't feel like one where Stanford is going to be able to keep up. To cap off that tough 5-game stretch, they do have SMU at home. Now, SMU makes their ACC debut this season as well, and they're going to be a pretty talented team. They're moving from the Group of Five to the Power Four, but SMU is going to be a pretty solid team in this conference. They have a really easy schedule, so it's definitely easy to see them going pretty far this season. As far as the conference standings go, they should be finishing near the top. Wake Forest will be a little bit easier of a game. They will be towards the bottom of the conference like Stanford, but still a decent team. Wake Forest is on the road, which is the only thing that's going to help Stanford out a little bit in this game. Otherwise, I do think Wake Forest is probably a little bit more talented than the Cardinal, so this is going to be pretty close. Definitely a tough game to predict there. The road trip to NC State is another really tough ACC game against one of the top teams in the conference. NC State is a dark horse playoff pick by a lot of different people, and especially on the road, that's going to be a really tough game for Stanford to win. Following the bye week, Louisville at home, another game against a top ACC opponent. Louisville made the conference championship last year. This team looks to take a little bit of a step back, but overall, they're still a really strong team. They should be finishing around 8 or 9 wins this year. A road trip to a decent Cal team. It's not as far of a road trip as most of their other ones, but this Cal team has Jaden Ott at running back. Overall, a decent roster. They'll probably be around 5 to 6 wins, pushing to make a bowl game. Still going to be a tough game for Stanford to compete in. And finally, San Jose State on the road. San Jose State should be one of Stanford's easier games. This one is to end the season, so that does help them a little bit, maybe get one last win. Overall, we do think Stanford is the better team, so they should be able to take care of that one on the road. They do have 6 home and away games, and with 4 of their opponents being ranked in our rank and file top 25, we gave Stanford a schedule difficulty of 6.5 out of 10. So taking a look at the prediction, it is really tough to see Stanford winning a lot of these games, especially with how difficult the ACC schedule is. TCU to start the season, while it's at home, we do like the Horned Frogs in that one. Stanford will pick up a win before their very early bye week over Cal Poly to move to 1-1, but after that is where things get a lot tougher. Syracuse, Clemson, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, SMU, all of those teams are better teams than Stanford. We do like all of those games to end up as losses for Stanford, unfortunately, which already drops them to 6 losses on the season. Wake Forest, I think, is probably going to be their lone ACC win if they're able to get that one done. It is a home game. Wake Forest isn't a super great team, so this feels like one of the games that Stanford should be able to compete in. NC State and Louisville also going to have to be losses. Cal does fall under the toss-up category, sitting at 35%. This game is on the road, but it's not a far road trip, so it's definitely a winnable game for Stanford. But we couldn't quite pick them to win it, so we did go with Cal. However, we do have Stanford closing out the year with a pretty easy win over San Jose State to move to 3-9. The projected record's not much higher, just sitting at 4.2 and 7.8. It does favor one more win, so potentially pulling off an upset somewhere. Could be TCU, could be Syracuse, Cal. Those are probably the 3 most likely in my mind. FPI's got them closer to 500, 5.2 and 6.8. Still not quite to that bowl game threshold, but that would be a much better season than just a 3-9 record. So overall, they've only got a 1% chance to make the college football playoff, which with this schedule, I would be very, very surprised if Stanford were even to make a run at a bowl game. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in our next video.